I'd like to thank my advisors for Young Green Coalition, Dr. Sheen and Tony Ortiz, for making this a reality. Their immense efforts have made this quite a popular event, and I appreciate all of you being here. I'd especially like to thank Ramon Mejia for offering Young Green Coalition such a historic opportunity. Here to welcome Dr. Stein to campus is the president of Riverside Community College, Dr. Isaac.
This is what democracy looks like. You are what democracy looks like. And first, a big thank you. Thank you to Dr. Walde Assad, if I'm saying that right. Assad, okay. And also to Dr. Rhonda Taub, the Vice President of the Faculty Union, and to Dr. Ward Schink in the Political Science Department, who is the advisor to the Young Greens on campus. And I hope after what you hear today that you feel empowered enough through the actions of these courageous people to stand up and say there is a different way forward, and we can talk about it on this campus, unlike some other campuses that won't allow us to come or won't allow us to come and speak freely. In this campus, you have an amazing leadership on this campus that is actually standing up for you and standing up to say that we can buck the status quo here. We don't have to confine ourselves to a predatory political system that's been throwing young people under the bus for too long. And that's why I'm so excited to be here. There's nowhere, in fact, that I would rather be than in the city colleges and on the campuses, community colleges and state colleges and the trade schools, because this is where real social change happens. This is also where the predatory political system is continuing to rake us over the coals. And the entire younger generation has been the latest cash cow for this predatory economic system that has not only locked you into predatory student loan debt, which is an outrage, but then it sees fit to deprive you of the jobs that you need in order to pay that debt back. So we say, number one, it's time to bail out the younger generation. If we bail out the crooks on Wall Street, if they bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who crashed the economy, it's time to bail out the victims of that waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street. And you know how we can do it? People say, oh, that's a great idea. Well, number one, you know what? Higher education pays for itself.
Yes.
I'm sure you know that. Well, I hope you know that. You know that now. So we don't have to apologize about asking for free public higher education as a human right.
Yes.
That's what it is. For every dollar that taxpayers put into public higher education, we get back $7 in return. That is the best investment imaginable. There is no excuse not to make public higher education free. So then people say, well, what about the debt? You know, we've got this $1 trillion. In fact, it's 1.3 trillion and rising. Because there are 44 million young people, millennials, Gen Xers, trapped in student debt. And people don't get out of debt, they just get into debt, so the numbers grow bigger and bigger by the day. It's 44 million people now, and that doesn't include your families and your parents and your brothers and sisters who are all helping out in one way or another. So we got the numbers that it takes to win any election. Just know that. 44 million people trapped in debt is a winning plurality of a three-way presidential race. Had we been able to get into the debates and say that, we would have a very different government today. Because in fact, We do have the power, and that means especially you. I'm just going to suggest one way. Right now, we are spending over the next decade or two $1 trillion on a new generation of nuclear weapons. That's what we don't need. We need to be banning nuclear weapons. We need to be dismantling nuclear weapons, not creating a new generation of nuclear weapons. We are too close. We are too close to nuclear Armageddon right now. According to the people who follow these things, we are in our most dangerous nuclear moment ever. So this is a good unto itself to dismantle those nuclear weapons and tear up that proposal, this plan that will tax us $1 trillion to pay for new nuclear weapons. Instead, we should put that $1 trillion into a new generation of young people and liberating them to be free actors in our economy of the future. That's how we pay off that student loan debt, and we put it to an end for once and for all by making public higher education free. Let me name a couple other things that we can do, and then I'm going to talk about how we do that. So, another big issue aside from student debt and the need for education. Let me say a word first about public education in our primary and secondary schools, because they too are under attack. We are seeing them privatized, corporatized, charterized, and then you see the charter schools cherry pick their students so they get good numbers, but they are not providing the public education that we should have. Quality education should not be a choice. It should be a right, yes, no matter what age you are. Yes. That's why Betsy DeVos should not be in charge of the We should be supporting our public schools, not privatizing them. So we need to fix public education as well. But moving on, and we can do that by putting our dollars, making sure that our public schools are fully funded, and making sure that students are taught. We got to teach to the whole student for lifetime learning, not to a high-stakes pen and paper test. Yes. And we need to bring back arts and recreation to make education real and meaningful. And to ensure that students come to school ready to learn, we need to ensure that we have universal health care for everyone, no matter what age you are. We need an improved Medicare for all health care program through single payer. Yes. And it doesn't cost not a penny more. Everybody in, nobody out. You're covered head to toe, cradle to grave, your reproductive health care, your mental health care, your community health, keeping a clean environment, your chronic health care, your medications, your pharmaceuticals. We have all these holes in our health care plans right now that you could drive a hearse through, which is why, some 20 or 30, even 40,000 people, the estimates vary, but it's a lot of people who die every year from lack of health care. The real threat to Americans' health, by the way, is not pseudo-Islamic terrorism, because Islam is not a terrorist religion. It is a distortion of Islam, like it is a distortion of Christianity to undertake terrorism of any sort. According to various authorities, National Public Radio, etc., the research shows that about 1 person is killed from so-called pseudo-Islamic terrorism per year in the United States, 1 a year. Do you know how many are killed by the consequences of poverty and poor education, which converges with poverty? You know how many are killed every year from that? 500,000 people per year. If you want to make the American public secure, we've got news for you, Donald Trump. It's not by spending half of our discretionary dollars fighting this war on terror. It's by fighting a war against poverty, against poor education, against poor health care. That's how we make us secure. Real issues, not fake issues with fake facts and alternative facts. We need real issues. So we have all the money we need to fund our public schools if we cut this outrageous, bloated military budget, which has basically doubled since before 9/11. Has that big budget made us secure? Has it? No. Let's hear it. Has it? No. No way. What did it do? It created failed states, it's created mass refugee migrations, and it's created worse terrorist threats. They're not getting better. Every terrorist group we've been fighting since 2001, going back to the Taliban, has only gotten bigger and stronger and covers more territory than they did. We're actually doing them a favor. We are recruiting more people to the cause of extremism through bombs and bullets.
War creates terrorists!
It does, absolutely. War is state terrorism. We've got state terrorism fighting alleged non-state terrorism. What we're calling for is a new kind of offensive in the Middle East. It's called a peace offensive in the Middle East, and it starts with a weapons embargo. Let's stop arming everybody and their mother for the sake of the weapons industry, which is feeding these wars for the sake of their own personal profits. We call for a weapons embargo to all parties to the wars in the Middle East, and we call for a freeze on the bank accounts of those countries, many of them our best allies, who are continuing to fund terrorist enterprises. That includes Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Hillary Clinton herself said as much in leaked State Department memos. So we can solve this crisis by actually fixing the crisis, not by pouring more fuel on this fossil fuel fire burning throughout the Middle East. That's how we fix it. In fact, according to many analysts, the war in Syria is motivated in substantial measure as a surrogate battle over which fossil fuel country gets to build their pipeline through Syria. That's kind of what this battle is about. So how about instead of spending $6 trillion, which is what we've spent over the last 15 years or so on these wars for oil? $6 trillion. Do you know how much that costs every household out there? Somewhere between $40,000 and $70,000 every household has put into these failed, catastrophic wars for oil in the Middle East. Do you think that was a good expense for your family to put some average $40,000 into these wars? How about instead they went into education? Yes. How about they went into public higher education and ending student debt? So we absolutely have the money by doing the right thing. We call for a foreign policy not based on economic and military domination, but a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. International law says that our wars in the Middle East have all been illegal. They are all illegal wars according to international law. We just need to start abiding by international law, and then maybe others will start to do it as well. We need to start setting the example that we're talking about. So we do have the money to do this. Another thing we have the money to do is to end this climate emergency. And it is an emergency which goes hand in hand, actually, with an economic emergency. Because the jobs crisis has not been fixed.
Anybody out there think the jobs crisis is fixed?
Hell no!
No way. What we got were part-time, low-wage, temporary jobs that cannot keep you out of poverty. Average wages for workers are still just barely above the poverty level, and workers have families to take care of too. So this isn't going to work. We need good jobs. That is an emergency, that we need jobs. Every job should be a living wage job and more. Every job. We not only have a right to living wages, we have a right to a good job. Everyone deserves a job who is ready to take a job, no matter what. That is a basic economic human right. So we propose solving these two crises in one fell swoop. When Pearl Harbor was bombed at the beginning of the Second World War for the U.S., we didn't say, oh, we'll deal with that in 10 or 20 years. We said, we're gonna respond right now. We've got a national emergency. It took 6 months to massively transform the economy to a wartime footing, unfortunately, that we are still on to this day. We need to get off of that wartime footing, and we need to do it in a hurry. We need to get off of the fossil fuel footing as well. This is an emergency. In Pearl Harbor, we lost one harbor. But with the climate emergency we have now, we are about to lose all harbors all around the world. The island of Manhattan, the state of Florida, the country of Bangladesh, and all low-lying population centers. It'll be 600 million refugees. Right now, you know how many refugees we got worldwide? It's about 60 million, 60, 65 million. So look at the crisis that has caused, and multiply it times 10. We're not getting out of here alive if we allow this sea level rise to take place. So this isn't something we can sit back on. We're seeing the climate crisis accelerate. California knows what this is about, to go between drought and floods. And when the floods come, they happen so fast that you're not actually able to capture the long-term water supply that you're going to need to sustain you through the drought. I mean, this is at crisis level already in California and many areas around the world. We need to start solving this now. Science News, 2 weeks ago, an academic journal called Geology, came out with the news that we've just hit another climate tipping point. The meltdown of what's called permafrost, which is basically a lot of frozen organic debris that turns into methane when it melts. And methane is basically the most powerful greenhouse gas out there. So that means that the climate crisis is about to accelerate. And all those scary predictions about when sea level rise is going to happen are going to start accelerating unless we take action now. That's why we need to declare a national state of emergency. That means everybody has a good wage job right now, creating that clean energy economy, that healthy, local, organic, sustainable food economy, creating that public transportation economy, and restoring our ecosystems and meeting human needs, which are part of the big picture here. So we're declaring that an emergency. But the good news is that we can end fossil fuels by 2030. If we declare an emergency, we can do this. We can solve this crisis. Not one more pipeline. No DAPL, no KXL, no fracking, no new coal trains, no unnatural gas, no offshore drilling. It all grinds to a halt, and we start to dismantle fossil fuels as we put everyone to work creating the emergency jobs program for the green energy, the green, clean energy that we can have right now. Nobody is more at risk than the workers on the fossil fuel lines right now, in the refineries, on the frac sites. They are going like sacrificial lambs here to the altar of fossil fuels because their risk of dying increases 700% The minute they walk into a fossil fuel job, from the risk of explosions and fires and equipment crashes and motor vehicle crashes, because they are not protected. The fossil fuel workers, you know, in coal mines, they are the canaries in the mine shaft, literally. We owe it to our workers, we owe it to our families, we owe it to the planet to make this emergency transition now. That means everybody has a job, it means we revive the economy, we stop climate change in its tracks, and we make the friggin' wars for oil obsolete. And the other good news here that you never hear about because they don't want you to know, the clean energy transition pays for itself. Why? Because we get so much healthier when we get rid of fossil fuel pollution. 200,000 people die in the United States every year. That's just the tip of the iceberg of sickness, of the asthma, of the cancer, of the heart attacks and the strokes, and all the diseases related to fossil fuels. They are massively reduced when we get rid of the fossil fuels. And there's very good data on that if you are one of those policy wonks and you want to know about it. There's great data on that. It happened in the country of Cuba, which was a natural experiment. When Cuba's pipeline went down, what happened? Cuba got healthy. It cost them $0. Their death rates from diabetes went down 50% when they lost their fossil fuels, because they had to transition to a healthy organic food supply, and they no longer had the fossil fuel pollution. So deaths from diabetes and heart attacks and strokes plummeted. What did it cost them? $0. They had a health miracle for $0. We spend $3 trillion, not on health care, on sick care, because we are being poisoned by fossil fuel pollution, by an industrialized food supply, and by a transportation system that takes away from us our right to recreation as transportation. We have a right to safe sidewalks and safe bike paths, to be able to go under our motor power, our muscle power, to get to transit hubs, for kids to get to school, and so on. This should be a part of our communities. We should not be living in the smog of toxic pollution that is making us sick in all kinds of ways. So we can have an economy, a healthcare system, an education system, a food system. We can have an international relations system that builds an America and a world that works for all of us. And the good news is that these are majoritarian ideals. These are majoritarian policies. Poll after poll shows that the majority of Americans support this. Bernie Sanders would have won this election.
He should have joined you! He should have joined you!
Yes, he should have joined me. And maybe he will yet. When we start winning elections, maybe he will then have the courage of his convictions and he will jump on the bandwagon.
Yes!
But we here have the courage of our convictions to lead that bandwagon, to create that change that we must have. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank Bernie Sanders, actually, because he was like the guy yelling, "The emperor has no clothes," and everybody agreed with him. That political system is screwed up. It has no clothes. And I thank all the more the people who were not talked back into resigning your vision and resigning your values and going back to the Democratic Party that again betrayed everyday people in their DNC meeting at the Democratic National Committee elections, where they rejected the reform candidate. They rejected every reform proposition, including the idea that we should get corporate money out of politics. We must get corporate money out. Absolutely. And that is what the Green Party has done for many years. We are what they don't want you to know about. The political system doesn't want you to know. We already have a party of by and for the people. And I thank to the bottom of my heart those people who woke up in the election after Bernie Sanders. How many here kind of woke up? How many are burners gone green? A lot of folks. All right.
Green, Bernie, green.
And how many are greens from the start? How many were out there blazing the trail? All right, you go greens. And how many are here because you've realized that we need a different kind of politics?
Yeah.
How many are here? All right. I'll tell you, you're ahead of me. Because it wasn't until the age of 50 years old that I realized we had to get political. I was an advocate fighting against environmental racism. I was fighting for health care as a human right. I was fighting for jobs and clean energy. And we were getting nowhere. To put it mildly, we were getting nowhere. And the Green Party came to me and they said, well, why don't you just keep fighting for what you're fighting for, but call it a political campaign and more people will hear about it. So I thought, well, we're certainly not getting anywhere outside of the political system. Maybe we have to fight inside the political system as well. And lo and behold, you know, I think what we have learned over the years, and especially in this election, is that we don't have to change people's minds. People already get it. They are tired of being thrown under the bus. That's why Donald Trump got the votes that he got from poor America, from labor America, from working America, because so many people have just had it up to here with the deregulation of Wall Street brought to us by the Clintons, with the offshoring of our jobs brought to us by the Clintons,
Yes.
from the financialization of our economy so that the bankers win the day brought to us by the Clintons. There were enough people who said, I'm just going to try something else. Most people were screaming to open up our debates so that they could find out what else there is.
Yes.
And had we been able to get into those debates, you know, maybe we were just one debate away from a political revolution. And I do believe we are.
Kick the donkey. No more Republican light.
No more Republican light, yes, and no more
Kick the
Republican
donkey.
heavy. The solution to Donald Trump is not more of this neoliberal, centrist Democratic Party that caused the right-wing extremism to start with. That's what history tells us. That when you have economic despair and misery, then you get demagogues who come along, like Donald Trump, and they want to blame immigrants. They want to blame Muslims. They want to blame Latinos and women and the LGBTQ community. And they want to blame Jews. They want to blame everybody but themselves. And actually, we're seeing the Democrats do a bit of that right now, too, in a slightly different way. They're blaming people for losing the election. They're blaming everybody but themselves, including independent third parties and people like myself that they are trying to label as Putin idiots. You know? We're serving the cause of Putin by standing up for independent politics. They're saying we interfered with the election by standing up for real democracy. You know, it's hard to say it without laughing. So there's just a lot of crazy political nonsense going on right now. We had a toxic election with a toxic result. The solution is not to go back to what helped produce right-wing extremism, but a new kind of politics for all of us that is not paid for by the predatory banks and the fossil fuel giants and the war profiteers. We need a politics of, by, and for the people. And another problem, front and center. Another problem, front and center, that we can solve in the blink of an eye. They say we have an immigration crisis. Well, if we have an immigration crisis, how about we stop causing that crisis to start with? Through NAFTA, through the war on drugs causing incredible violence south of the border, from which people flee as refugees. How about overturning other democracies south of the border, like in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador? This is what's creating the wave of refugees. And then what do we do with the refugees when you come here? We criminalize the refugees from our very own predatory policies.
Refugees, welcome!
So we need to stop creating this crisis of migration, and we need to welcome the immigrants who have always been at the backbone of our economies, in our communities, in our culture.
Climate change will require it! America started with immigrants!
Absolutely. We are all immigrants on this bus, except for the Native Americans from whom we stole the land, and except for the African Americans brought here in chains, to whom we owe reparations for their incredible contributions to the society that we are today. They need to be the beneficiaries and be repaid for their sacrifice. We need to be made whole by this.
Black Lives Matter!
Absolutely. And yes, definitely. If all lives are to matter, then we need for Black lives to matter, because they are left out of the equation right now. So we need to make this an America that's working for everyone, and that includes a welcoming path to citizenship for the immigrants who are here. And furthermore, we need a Marshall Plan south of the border so that we can restore to wholeness the economies that have been suppressed over the decades and over the centuries by predatory U.S. policies and colonialism. We need a Marshall Plan to put an end to this economic inequality. People shouldn't have to come to the United States in order to feed your families. Yes. We need economies that can stand up all around the world. We are on one small boat on this planet Earth, on Mother Earth. We are one humanity on one planet. We need an America and a world that works for all of us. Let me just say that we do have the power to create this world. Remember what happened under Richard Nixon, one of the most corrupt, authoritarian, repressive presidents that we've had up until now. What did we get? Under Richard Nixon, we got the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. We got a women's right to choose from a very conservative Supreme Court. We got OSHA protecting worker health and safety. And we brought, we brought the troops home from Vietnam. How did we do that? By being unstoppable out in the streets and by being a relentless force on our elected officials. We forced political change. In the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, never will. We are that demand.
Woo, woo! Yeah.
What else happened under Richard Nixon? He was impeached, as you may have heard from the history books, or maybe you were there. He was impeached. Donald Trump is living on borrowed time because he is a walking minefield of legal, constitutional, and ethical liabilities. He is even driving the Republicans crazy by kicking off of the National Security Council the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, who was kicked off in order to make room for the white nationalist racist in chief, that is Stephen Bannon, is now on the Security Council. So this is crazy enough that even the Republican establishment is quaking in their boots about this monster that they have allowed to be created. So we could see things turn around rather quickly. Chris Hedges, everybody knows Chris Hedges. Yes. Yes, for Chris Hedges, an incredible journalist who has always told the truth. He was in East Germany just before the wall came down, and the story he tells is that the democracy advocates in East Germany were saying 1 week before the wall came down, oh, maybe in 10 years we'll start to get somewhere. Maybe in 10 years we can fight back against this authoritarian Stasi state. And what actually happened? A week later, the crowds were so enormous out in the streets that the government called out the military. It was so humiliating, but the military said, no thank you, we are not going to fire on moms and baby carriages. We need to be that movement out there with moms and baby carriages so that we are actually bringing down this corrupt and authoritarian regime. It just happened in South Korea. 2 years ago it happened in Guatemala. So don't for a minute drink this Kool-Aid that they're trying to force down our throats that we are powerless. We are powerful.
People power!
Not powerless. We are powerful. Let me hear it. We are powerful. We are powerful. We are powerful. And indeed we are. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We've got it and we're going to use it. Now, a quick word about how we use it. It's about being out in the street, but it's also about getting together. Because if we're just out on the street on one issue or another issue, we are divided and conquered. We need to be out there for immigrant rights and women's rights and indigenous rights and parents' rights and workers' rights. We need to be out there for LGBTQ rights, absolutely, all together. The bottom line is that we are a movement for people, planet, and peace over profit. Right now it's profit squishing all of us human beings in this planet. Well, we're going to turn it around. It's people, planet, and peace over profit. That is what the Green Party is. Political power is all about building coalitions. The Green Party is the only national level party that is free of corporate corruption, that doesn't take corporate money. There are many critical parties of the left right now, the socialist and peace and freedom and progressive parties. We are all working together and we must continue to work together. And the Green Party is the one party that has survived as a national party. I don't care what name we call it. The critical thing is that we are not corrupted. We are not poisoned by corporate money. We are parties of the people. We are standing up together for that agenda. And the Green Party happens to be the national force in this coalition. So I urge you to step up to the plate, to get involved, to call my dear friend Eric Rydberg, who will actually answer your call, and that we all work together. We need to have a thriving Green Party chapter here on campus, and I thank so much Dr. Ward Schenck for being the advisor to that, and all of you who have been involved, but we need to grow that, because that's where we get strength. We get strength in the numbers, we get strength in establishing student chapters in our high schools, in our technical schools, in our community colleges and our universities, because it's really the power of the student movement that is really going to bring transformative change. It always has, and it always will be the power of that younger generation.
Millennials are the future!
Which is why we need these campus chapters. We cannot change things unless we get together. And it takes work and energy to get together and stay together. That's what a real political party is about. That is what the Green Party is about. We are running candidates right now in 2 amazing elections that could be those breakthrough elections we've been running for. Kenneth Mejia, do people know about Kenneth? He's running for Congress in a winnable special election in Los Angeles, who is standing up for immigrant rights, for Standing Rock. We need people who are really standing up for us in government. If you go to Mejia, M-E-J-I-A, for Congress.com, you can find out about Kenneth's campaign. You can help. You can phone bank from a distance. You can do the same for Sherry Honkala, who is running for state representative in Philadelphia. The political establishment is quaking in their boots that we should break through, because it will be a sign that the time has arrived, because the clock is ticking. This is the Hail Mary moment on a generation locked into debt and poverty and homelessness, which is deadly. The clock is ticking on the climate meltdown, which is deadly. The clock is ticking on the absence of health care, which is deadly. The clock is ticking on nuclear weapons, which have never been more dangerous than they are right now. The clock is ticking on the expansion of wars and the red baiting against Russia right now, and this butting up against the potential for a Cold War that's going to turn into a hot war. The clock is ticking on all of this. So it's time for us to stand up and be that moral compass. Democracy is not just a question of who do we hate the most. You know, that was the question on most Trump voters' minds. Who am I most afraid of? For far too many voters, That was the main question. We've got to go to the polls to stand up for a future that's going to work for all of us. That's what we should be voting for. Democracy needs that moral compass. We've got to be that moral compass. And we could have, by the way, ranked choice voting right now, which means you don't have to vote against the guy you're most afraid of. Ranked choice voting means you go to the polls and you rank your choices, knowing that if your first choice, who might be an underdog, if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. What a no-brainer. Why don't we have this already? The state of Maine just passed it by voter referendum because this is a no-brainer solution, and our legislatures won't pass it. The Democrats won't allow it to go forward. Governor Brown just vetoed enabling legislation that would have allowed cities and towns to use ranked choice voting and then to work our way up from there. Why do Democrats try to shoot this down? Because it calls their bluff. It means they actually have to compete with a truly progressive party. They don't want to compete with a progressive party. They just want to compete with the greater evil so they can extort your vote. They can intimidate you into voting for them because the only other choice is someone worse. The fact that they try to intimidate you and scare you into voting for them is reason enough not to give them your vote under any circumstances. In my view, they are entrapping us. We could pass by voter referendum ranked choice voting statewide, and the Green Party is now looking at this seriously as running a voter referendum to change our voting system throughout the state. But we can also do it at the local level. All those things that I was talking about, including fighting for free public higher education and for demilitarizing our budget, all those things can also be fought for at the local level, so that if we are electing Greens as city councilors or mayors or members of school committee, we actually have a real leg to stand on to go to the legislature or to the Congress and say, as an elected official from your city or town, that with the authority of that town, you are calling on and demanding our legislatures or our Congress do the right thing all across the board. We do have the power to actually take the future into our hands, to challenge power and to seize power, and to rally around candidates, which is what we do in the Green Party. We continue fighting the social battles that we're fighting, but we bring us together and we also challenge power by running for office. Otherwise, we will be written off and tossed off and thrown under the bus like we have been for the past many decades. The clock is ticking. It's time for us to stand up. We can have an America and a world that works for all of us. It's about joining a Green Party near you. It's about running for office or supporting someone else to run for office. It's about taking that power into our own hands, because we do have the power to create an America and a world that works for all of us. The power to create that world is not just in our hopes, it's not just in our dreams. Right here and now at Riverside City College, that power is in our hands. Let's make it so.